Hey folks, Jason here with Dirt Race Life. In this episode, we're going to connect our steering sector to our steering wheel. While doing it in a way where we use a quick steer, we keep safety in mind, and I'm going to show you the secret to how we get that really smooth operation that everybody needs on their race car. With that said, let's get started. Let's talk about this shaft for a second. Now this is the All-Star that I purchased, and I strongly recommend that you purchase a shaft that is for steering. And there's a difference in what it is. This is a DOM that's drawn over mandrel, so that means that it's a corrected size, and it's 120 wall, so it's really thick. So there's no seamed weld in it. It's a really thick wall, and I really think you should use a thicker, heavier steering rod shaft like this. And the reason being is if you are using something like you bought in a farm store that's a real thin wall piece of 3/4 inch, well, it may fit outside and everything for it, but it's thin and it's got a seamed weld down it, and you're twisting that tube. And so you're really working against the weakest aspect of that HREW welded seam tubing. It's not designed for that at all. I really think, from a safety standpoint, we should be using steering shaft rod like this right here, or from some other manufacturer. The main thing is it's heavy wall and it's DOM. There's no weld line in it or anything. It's all been drawn over mandrel. It's even. I will say on this one, I did have to clearance it. This came in and I measured, everything was fitting really tight, and this one was around 752, 753. And so I took it down to 750. I just chucked up a hand drill with an extractor in the end of it and took a piece of sandpaper and just spent about an hour sitting in a chair and just worked it over, measuring with calipers until I got it to about 750, was happy with it because I want my shafts to go well. Now, this is a 3/4 inch heim joint. It has been clearanced, and there is a difference, and I wanted to cover that right quick when you start ordering parts, okay? You can't just order a 3/4 inch heim and expect it to work with a steering shaft. And the reason not is clearance. And like these steering shafts, like this one was a little bit over 750. This heim joint was right at 750. It was way too tight, and I had to clearance and stuff. But if you order a joint that is for steering, it will be clearanced. It will be like 752, 753 from the factory. And so it'll fit over the shaft. It's designed to be able to slide down the shaft and everything. So just keep that in mind when you start ordering parts. Now, the reason that I'm using this, so this is an old lower rod, I think this one's off of a late model. But anyway, I'm gonna cut this off. So this is steel tube, and I've got this mocked up. This is a stabilizer brace that I can use down at the footwell, okay? So I like to use, this is part of it being smooth, and you want to stop movement and stuff. That's gonna make sense when we put this in, all right? Then coming up, okay? You don't have to have these. I repurposed this one. This is where we're going through the firewall. You can just as easily, just like on our radiator video where we were doing a radiator mount and we had some 1/4 inch rubber. If you got some 1/4 inch rubber, like a piece of flat rubber or some conveyor belt material or something, you can drill a hole through the middle of it and, put a couple holes in it, cut it round. Does exactly the same thing. You're just wanting to stop the dirt and the debris from coming through into the cockpit with you. You want to cut a small hole, for that to go through. And you don't want your steering shaft to be sitting there rubbing against the metal as you're turning it around and everything. So regardless, whether you buy one or you can make one, same difference. I have just cut a small piece of conveyor belt material, put a hole through the middle of it, does the exact same thing. And then coming up, now we're gonna use a fairly fancy piece right here. This is our stabilizer. It comes with one bearing. Now this is repurposed. I'm real bad about finding old junk cars and getting all the go fast parts off of them. That's really the cheapest way to get some of this stuff. But anyway, comes with one bearing already in it, and then I turned around and I made a second bearing. I really think that's important for you to have your rod stabilized where you're turning. You're gonna put a lot of force on the steering wheel, especially, you don't realize it, but you can bend your steering rod loading and unloading the car and stuff without the engine running. If you're gonna mess something up in your steering, that's when you're gonna do it. You won't do it on the racetrack. You'll do it when you hold that steering wheel from the side and you're jerking real hard on it, trying to turn your wheels to load the car or move it in and out of the shop, something like that. And so adding extra joints to this is a big deal to really help control that, as well as using, you know, the right type of material to start with. All right, and then getting to the good stuff. And I wanted to cover this, connecting the steering wheel. Firmly believe in, you know, quick releases. And I found one that I really like, but I want to show you. Start with the least expensive, you know, hexagon, okay? 3/4 of an inch on the middle, goes over the shaft, push button. All right, and so what that push button does, it's got a spring in there, and it will make a little bar in here release, and that's so that the shaft can slide on and off. And that one's kind of tight, but it'll hold it in place, and then when you push the button, it'll pull out, okay? I don't like these. I ran them, and I don't like them. Here's why I don't like this. There is one button in one place. When you're getting into the car to race, you're fine. When you're getting out of the car when the race is over, you're fine. When you really need this to come off, because it's an emergency, because you've got a problem, you've got a fire or whatever, you're hunting this button. And you're probably hunting it in the dark, in the smoke, in the whatever that you can't see. Okay, so that's a problem. So don't like these. I understand cost-wise, you know, $35, $40. But as far as you being able to grab that and hit that, you know, I kind of justified it to myself that I got where I knew where it was and everything, and I always hit it the same way. So you know, racing the same car over time, I felt like that was okay. Looking back, I would have struggled with this, and so look at it from that standpoint. Next up, all right, is what I like, and that's the paddle that goes all the way around, all right? So it's a ring that goes all the way around here, okay? And so, and just keep in mind, and this is right here on your steering wheel, all right? But you can pull anywhere up, and it's doing the same thing. It's releasing that bolt across there where the shaft can come out, okay? Anywhere along the lines is the way that works. Now this I like, because all I do is grab the steering wheel in the center. So my hand goes over the steering wheel, I pull with my fingers and pull this back, and the steering wheel comes off. So I can do that. I mean, if I've got my hands on the steering wheel, all I've got to do, I don't have to see. My hands go to the middle, I pull, it comes off. All right, doesn't matter if I can see, doesn't matter if I'm upside down, none of that matters. I know how to get this steering wheel off reflexively. It's right there. Pull, it's off. All right. So I like that. Let's talk about the next aspect of it. The hexagon. I thought hexagon was fine until I ran across the splines like this. All right. I will never go back, but they're expensive, and that's the problem. So just this unit in hexagon, you know, this steps up to about $60. And this is the least, this is an LRP, so it's pull, okay, so you pull it. And then also it's spline. This was the least expensive one that I could find for this build that I felt like had the quality, all right? And I think this was about $80, and I found it, the only place I found this was on Pit Stop USA, so I don't know if this is an in-house brand for them or not, but I cannot find it anywhere else by anybody else. But this is about 80, and the next step up anywhere is over 100 for these things. Now, the reason that I like the splines is two things, and I think they make a difference. One, there is definitely a difference between the splines and the 6 hex point like this when it comes to how well it holds with the steering wheel rocking. I cannot stand for my steering wheel to rock back and forth. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So like when you've got this on here with this hex, the hex itself has got only 6 large flat surfaces, and the steering wheel will rock. And I found that these big dry slick tracks, that little bit of rock, you know, that is movement in your steering system. All of your steering system, you want it to be controlled 100% by your hand movement. You want everything to go immediately to that sector and out to your wheels. You don't want any gap or any slack anywhere. And so I don't like it for that reason, because it seems like I've changed these out. I've used them. It doesn't matter. Every one of these, after about a season, I can take the edge of that steering wheel and I can move it forward and back, you know, 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Every one of them. And so that drove me crazy. And then when I got my first spline unit and I dropped it up, and because it has all of these splines and the way it hooks in, that movement is just gone. It's not there. And so your steering wheel is firmer in your hand. You don't get any of that rock back and forth. I think that helps. That helps especially when you're in that race with a lot of laps, really dry slick track, and you're really focused on that nuanced, hitting your numbers, entering exactly right, that little bit of steering turn that you want in just the right place, you know, so that you can catch that little bit of brown. And all of these little things like this, they stack up, they add up and make a difference. So that's the first thing. The second thing is on clocking the timing. Now on the six point, you've pretty well got to weld all this together if you're wanting to get your steering wheel to sit exactly like I like my steering wheel to sit like this right here, heads up, with the leg straight down in the bottom. All right, and I want to set it that way, and then I know if I'm in a wreck or something and this is sitting off in any way, that something's happened. You know, that I've got bent tie rod ends. My sector's taken a hit. Something's happened. And with the 6 point, if I change the sector out, or I make some change with the car, or something happens, and this gets out of time slightly and it's all welded up, you know, I have to go a full 1/6 of a turn. And so I may not be able to get that to exactly where I want that again without doing some work on adjusting out my sector or something. And I want everything to set square. It's kind of got its place that it wants to be. And so that can be a bit of a problem to get exactly where you're looking for. It's little things, but all these little things add up. With the multi-spline like this, your splines are so fine and everything that you can drop your steering wheel on and you can go to that centered point every time. Now, I always put a mark on it where I return to the same point. But if for some reason I change a sector out or something happens and I make some changes on the car, the way it's towed or anything going on with it, well, these splines like this, I can still put my steering wheel and set it to a centered position. All right, so it's two things. That's the minor one, but like I said, it all adds up. And so these are all of the parts that are going in to getting from the sector to the steering wheel. Let's put it all on the car. All right, we're gonna put our spline piece on first. It'll just slide right on. And there's a flat on your sector, and so you're gonna want your pinch bolt to be right on that flat. Obviously, you don't wanna mess your splines up, and that's a good way to keep from it. All right, and so let me just lock this down temporarily. I'm gonna set this where the end is just right there. Doesn't go all the way down on it. I just want it where the splines is to the edge there. And it's a good idea, don't bottom, when you're doing this stuff, don't bottom anything out. You want to have the ability to get some wiggle room and movement where you need it, y'all. All right, next up, the D-tube, okay? So let's get that in there. And I have drilled, I've got a little hole that I put there just so that set screw's got something, because this is hard and that's smooth. So that's just a little indentation that I put in it so that it's got something to bite. Because we would not want this to come out. And I doubt it would, but I don't want to take any chances. It's the same deal. I figured out where that would be at, and then right in there. There we go. Right in that hole. And of course, I know it, you know, it's not even tight and it won't pull out. So everything that has to do with the steering, really look at this from a failure standpoint, from a safety standpoint. Look at everything like that. Now, this outside tube, I didn't show this a while ago. There's an Alumite fitting on this. And the reason there's an Alumite fitting on this is because I'm going to grease this right here. And I am going to flush grease out of this joint right here. And so I'm always flushing any water or dirt out of and away from this joint. And this joint right here is so critical because this knuckle right here, as that turns over, that U-joint is going to make that shaft move in and out. And it's a few thousandths. It's not a lot. But what it will do is when if I've got all of this locked together and I've got this quick steer that's locked down to the frame here and the sector's locked down to the frame here, even a few thousandths that U-joint is pushing in and out, if I don't have somewhere for this to go, then what that will do is that will create like a pulse in your steering wheel. So as you're turning your steering wheel, you'll feel like a tight, loose as this turns over. And you know, you'll think it's your sector going bad or something, and it's not. It's actually not having this slip joint right here. Or if you've got a slip joint, the slip joint no longer working the way it should. And so this is a really critical thing. The other aspect of it is if you fold this front clip up, you're giving this shaft somewhere to go, to give, so that it's not transferring it back into your steering wheel. But there's another element to that. That is the reason that I do not want one shaft going from here in a straight line to the steering wheel. I never want that done. And the reason is that if this is folded up for some reason and it's in line, it's going to push that steering wheel forward right into your chest. Not a place you want to be, not how you want to end your racing career. If you have this at an angle, okay, and you fold, and where it angles is where this front clip would fold, then this front shaft will just fold with the clip. Don't get me wrong, I'm not interested in folding the car up, but if it does fold up, I want to be able to control how these things fail. And so having a knuckle joint, an angle in it like that is in an area where that if this does get bent up, it's going to bend in that joint instead of pushing that shaft. Now this will also take up some of that. All right, so you got both sides of it. And for that reason, I try to set this, I've measured and made marks on it because I want to have several inches in here that this can slide up in. Now as far as the U-joint giving so that I don't get any pulse in the steering wheel or anything, you know, I only need 1/8 of an inch for that. The rest of this that I'm making sure I have is the safety element and I'm changing the sector out and I want to pull this back and get it out of the way. Or I need to do maintenance on my quick steer and I want to be able to pull this back and get it out of the way and take my quick steer off, anything like that. Well, having several inches in the slip joint is going to make your life so much easier. So I strongly recommend, you know, save this off of your car. If not, just go to the junkyard and get one. And, you know, like a pull apart place or something if you can. And of course, you can still order these, you know, replacement new. All right, okay, so that's the next part. Now, the quick steer, all right, we're going to put this on, and I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see it. There's a black magic marker line that I've put down this plate right here. And what that line represents is that is my alignment between my sector and the center of my seat. I want the steering wheel coming straight at me, center of my seat. And so that's what this line recommends, that's what that line is doing. I want the steering sector to go straight into this line right here, and I want to make sure that I'm going to clear my upper control arm right here, even if I was to make some movements on it or something. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to figure out what my distance is. And I got a 3/4 inch. I need to cut a small piece of 3/4 inch to weld into this one and weld into this one. And I am going to show y'all this little bracket that I built is going to sit on that plate right there, and then I'm going to drill a hole through this plate and drop the quick steer through it. And so this is a nice beefy piece that's going to give our quick steer some real security. So let's put this together and get us a measurement. And it looks like outside to outside. I'm going to slide that over just a little bit. I'm 3 inches from the outside of this to the outside of this collet. And so based on that, I can take all of this apart, cut a piece and put in here. All right, we got it all welded up here. I'm not going to grease anything right now because all of this is coming apart and hopefully getting to paint in the next week or two. All right, I've got my bracket bolted on, and I think I'm going to put the bracket up top where the bolts will be easy to get to, and then it won't hold water here. So we're going to put it in. Now the splines are universal. There's no timing on this to put it at a particular point. We know in line where it's supposed to be this way, but in the height, when I'm back this all the way up, this alumite right here, I've got the end of it out. I'll put the end in before it's over. I just need to make sure that this alumite's not going to hit my control arm and it's not going to hit the floor. I want this probably to be as low as I can get it. That's going to put more angle in my upper rod, my steering wheel. It'll point my steering wheel down a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this as like a 1/2 inch shim here. And that way I know I've got room for that alumite. I'm going to sit that up there, and I've already marked a line here. So I'm just going to draw a circle right around where that's going, because we're going to cut a hole through this plate, and then this is going to slide forward into it. That's going to make sense just here in a second. All right, so I got a circle, I got a location, and I know that that's enough space, that alumite, to not hit on the frame itself. I can just pull that out right there. And the easiest way to do this is with a multi-step. Let's see if it'll start. All right, so let's put this in here. All right, holes drilled. Got her here. Let's slide them back together. All right. So we're going to put that up. Make sure yep, got it going the right way. So that's going to go right through there like that. All right, we got it all welded in. I went ahead and threw primer on everything. All of the steering system is going to stay in. I'm going to paint it all with the car. So I want to get primer under everything in case I have something covered up. I don't end up with rust streaks under the paint. So let's get this quick steering in. So slides back, slide her in here. We'll bolt her down. And the next part is figuring out where that hole gets cut in the firewall. And that can be a little tricky depending on how far away your joint is. Our joint that's going to be on the outside of the firewall is going to be fairly close to it. So that makes it fairly easy. As you get further away, you know, you're kind of having to guess harder to figure out where that is. Now, we could cut the the steering shaft down, put the steering wheel on it and get in the seat. And that would help. And, you know, like get somebody to hold that in place there, or, you know, put a 2x4 across and, you know, zip tie the shaft to a 2x4 across there to hold it in place and stuff. We could do that. But since our U-joint out here is so close to the firewall, we really don't have to. We can overcut that hole just a little bit and we're going to be in good shape. All right. So this is good. We're just wanting this to be robust, not be able to do any twisting. That is a beautiful setup for that. We would not want this just on a flat plate sticking out that could twist in this direction. That would be bad. We want something like this where the twist is taken completely out. It's not going to get torsional hits on it this way. It's going to get hits on it this way as far as where the torque is going to be applied. So that's perfect. Love it. Now, next piece is our other U-joints that I've already got the spline adapter on. So I'm going to slip it on, get it in place. All right, so now that's not going anywhere. And you see here, I'm within, this is ideally what I would want, because I'm only 1.5 inches out from the shaft. And so I already know I can just line of sight, and I know that that's going to point up towards where my shoulders are. And so I can just take that magic marker and I know about where my hole should be. This is really not that hard at all. Probably didn't even need to lock that down. So that's where my hole is going to be. Maybe just a little bit higher. I'm going to overcut it just a little bit. Again, we've got a block here that's going to go in. And I'm going to overcut it just a little bit to give us a little adjustment room for the steering wheel. And the nice thing is, the closer you can get to your firewall with where your joint is, that's going to give you a lot more range of being able to move the steering wheel around without running into a conflict here on your firewall. Whereas, as this U-joint moves away from your firewall, now in order to say have some range to raise your steering wheel up or lower your steering wheel down, you're going to need to have a longer and longer slot or bigger hole to be able to move that shaft around as this moves away from it. So being right close to it is going to let us be able to have a small amount here that we don't have to move, but a lot of range there with the seat. So if I've got somebody else driving the car and we need to move the seat up, put a different seat in, and we need to move that steering wheel around, we're not going to run into a problem with a bind down here on the firewall. So that really works well like that. Alright, I've opened that hole up, I think just right. Let's see if we've got that finished up there. Get this locked into place again. I think that's right. Yep, got it the right spot. Alright, we've got our shaft here. Okay, yeah. All right, so I'm not touching anymore, everything's great. Now, the next part, we've got to figure out what to cut this shaft down to. We get one shot at this, we got to get it right. And here's the problem. If I've got the shaft in place and stuck into the U-joint here, how do I get in there and sit in the seat with the shaft going all the way through? Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to get in the car, and I'm going to take a tape measure, I'm going to hold the steering wheel in place, I'm going to take a tape measure, and we're going to make a guesstimate. And we're going to cut this shaft a little long just to be safe. Let me set my stuff here where I can get to it when I get in. So now we're going to get in the car. Alright, and I'm going to take the steering wheel, get in here, sit back just like I'm strapped in. Not worried about the height. Worried about the distance from it to the firewall. So, if you got a buddy to help with this, it would really help. Of course, you know I work, everything's alone. But I want this thing right in here. It's gonna be, I want that elbow, I don't know how y'all are, but I want my elbow to be down here and not extended forward. Because if my elbows are locked into my full containment seat, if my shoulders, the way I do is my full containment seat's just right to fit me, and I tense up and I got my shoulders locked into it, and so I don't want my elbows to be extended up and doing this. I want that steering wheel to be right here, where I'm not reached out for it. And then by having that elbow locked in, I feel like I've got more control over the steering. Because what I don't want is I don't want to get jerked or hit or anything, and then my arm, moves. The inertia makes my hand jerk the steering wheel. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So I'm going to be right in here. This is a little long. So that's 36 inches to the firewall. Okay, for me, that's 36 inches to the firewall, and then I'm going to figure from the firewall to the joint. And I'm going to cut it, and then we'll be able to put it in and mock it up. Now, we're not worried about putting any bearings in right now, because all we're doing is getting the shaft length and getting it connected to that U-joint down there, And then we'll turn around and start sliding the stuff on from this end, because the last thing we're going to do is we're going to weld on. We're going to weld on the spline coupler. That'll be last. So everything can slide down forward. The only thing that has to go on now is my cover on the front of the firewall. It's going to go on that side. And other than that, everything's going to slide on from this end. So all we're worried about is length. 36 inches on this side plus what's on that side. Let's see what we come up with. 2.5 more inches. I'm going to add 2.5 more inches. 38.5 inches is what we're going to cut this thing to. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There we go. Alright. I'm going to slide the steering shaft down on here. Let's see. Yeah, I cut it a little long, that's for sure. I need to take, yep, about 1 inch. We're going to take 1 more inch off of it. I'm going to weld that. Now when I take this inch off, I'm going to go ahead and weld the U-joint up on that end. And the way this is, I can go ahead and weld that up, and I can slide it out forward. Even though it won't go through that hole in the firewall, it'll go out the front. So I can do that, slide that firewall cover on and everything from that end. So that's going to work real good. Let's get that done. We've got our steering rod in place. I've got it welded to the front U-joint there. I've got the bushing on that side. There are 3 more bearings going on this, all right? So you remember that repurposed radius rod that I showed at the beginning there? Well, you see where I've cut that down? I got the end on it. That's going to go all the way down in front of my feet. So we'll weld it up in a minute. That'll be one of the last things. We'll adjust it and we'll weld it. So that's a stabilizer rod on that end. We need a stabilizer on that far end of that rod. We need a stabilizer on the far end of the steering shaft, because when we're twisting and pulling on this, it's going to want to wobble at that U-joint down there if we don't have some type of a stabilizer. So this is part of getting that smooth system. So we'll just push it down out of the way. Then we've got a second one, and this is going to be right up at the steering wheel, right behind the main one. So that one's going to get pushed down out of the way. I'm just getting them on here so that I have to do this multiple times. And then here's our main. And so that's a steering bearing there. Now this bearing will come out. It has a snap ring. And it's going to go on. And I've got this steering brace. I have made a small bracket right here to bolt this onto. I wanted a little bit more. I didn't want to clamp this directly to my roll cage right here, because it was going to put some distance from the end of the steering wheel. The closer I can get this bearing to the steering wheel, the more secure that it's going to feel. I'm going to get less movement side to side in the steering wheel by doing that. And I wanted to drop it down just a little bit to get a little bit more adjustment out of it. And so that is going right there. All right. Okay, so we've got bolted down tight. I ended up taking the end hole off of my support right here. I think my fingers were going to between it and the actual steering wheel itself. It was going to be a little too tight for me. So I cut it down 1 notch to get this just right. Both the bearings is in, worked out where this is floating in the middle. And I want to show you this bearing down here. So you see I've cut that off and everything. This is really important, y'all. On the front section up there, we've got that slip joint with the double D, okay? And so as our U-joint is rolling through that angle, that slip joint is letting it move in and out as it needs to, all right? Up here, I don't have a slip joint. Really important when we start talking about what makes these steering systems work really smooth. This shaft needs to be able to wiggle just a little bit up, back, and forth. And that's where you get into, you want to make sure that you don't have super tight bearings on your steering column. If you cannot slide these easily on the shaft, you've got to fix that, because this shaft needs to be able to move back and forth. You don't realize it, but as you roll this steering wheel, it's going to move just a little bit as that U-joint works through that angle. And if it can't, you'll get that notch, that bump feeling, that not perfectly smooth. It'll almost be imperceptible, but it'll be there. And so with this one, it just falls right back down. But I'm going to put a little bit of grease on every one of these on the shaft under it, because that shaft needs to be able to move in it. And I'll paint them all and everything, and then when I'm doing maintenance and stuff, I'll use like a can of spray white lithium grease, and I'll spray these bearings and then just take a rag and wipe off the excess off of them. But that'll be a normal maintenance thing. And then like on this front bearing right here, I actually have an alumite on it. And anyway, so critical deal. Now, for this piece right here, we're gonna weld it down. So I've got it set for length, and I've got a magnet here to square it up. But I'm actually gonna weld it to the floor. If I just had this U-joint on the other side of this firewall with all of this long shaft up through here, when I put real hard pressure on this shaft, if I didn't have a support bearing down here, this shaft right down at the U-joint, what would happen is, instead of it just turning smoothly, it would oscillate, it would orbit. So the shaft itself would work it would go around in a circle like this. All right, and so that would take some smoothness away. And because I don't want that, I want that great, we're building a car just to be super competitive on big, dry, slick tracks. That's what this car is really being built for. And so a great smooth steering system is really, really important. All right, so next up, I got my bearing out of the way here. This the steering coupler right here, we drop it down. We can drop it all the way down to the end being flush. That's what a lot of people do. Like a final sanity check, when you do this, it's curtains, that's it. You can't do nothing else. A little debris cover here. Put a little bit of grease right there as well. All right, let's see if we can get these bolts in here. Hey, do me a favor. Let me know in the comments, this level of detail, is this too much or too little? You know, if you like the way we do these how-to videos where we really get right down to the nitty-gritty detail of it, if that's your thing, smash the like button, leave me a comment, let me know. Because we're watching that to try to figure out, you know, of course, every one of these videos we do, they're very time-consuming, don't get me wrong. It slows us down some on our building and stuff. But at the same time, if it's useful and if it's helping support the community and putting more race cars on the track, then it's worth it. So it is very much appreciated when you share these videos, when you hit the thumbs up button, when you leave comments. All of that is helping us to know whether or not we're hitting the mark on what we're after here. So give us feedback. We are paying attention. All right, so let's check it out here. Got our steering here. Of course, we just squeeze and drop. In, out. It's perfect. Yep. Right where it's supposed to be. And then I use a 2-to-1 quick steer. So let's see. If I start right here, there's one turn. Oh, y'all, I got lucky. I just assumed that sector that was on this 73 Le Mans chassis was a 4-to-1, and it's not. It's like a 3 or 3 1/4 to 1. So that's a win. that sector is good, we're definitely going to like this steering. Got a good quick ratio. Because when we're driving, even on a heavy track, I don't want to ever double my hands over. And me personally, I race one-handed is the way I race. I typically will leave this hand on my brake bias the whole time. And I'm always, I'm constantly, in a turn, out of turn. Every time I enter a turn, how was that? How was that? How was that? And seeing if I can just tune down to a little bit better, a little bit better. And so I'll tend to drive with one hand all the time. And I got this one over here, turning my right front on or off, hitting that brake bias, that kind of stuff. And with me, I'm comfortable. I want to be able to just keep that hand on that wheel and come here or come here, and that's all I'm ever doing. And 2-to-1 quick steer can get you where that you can do that. So I'm liking this, and just all of the bearing support, super smooth. That's what you're after. Make a big difference when you're on a smooth, dry, slick track, on a skinny tire. You're trying to keep the car hooked up to the track. The steering system is a part of getting a car to be able to roll smoothly through the turn, pick the throttle up and roll off and carry as much momentum as possible. Having that great steering system is a piece of that creates that winning combination. Hey, if you're not following our Crate Racin Street Stock build, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications. We are moving fast at this point. More to come. Thank y'all for watching.